Hey everyone, this is Ben the Bar Guy, and this is the YouTube channel that helps you make better drinks. Today, we're gonna start a new playlist, a new set of videos that talk about individual cocktails and how best to make them, maybe a little history on them, and we're gonna show you how to make individual drinks, how they're made, and you'll be able to use that as a guide to drinks that are similar and making those down the line. So, today, we're gonna start with the father of all cocktails, the Old Fashioned cocktail, or the whiskey cocktail, or the Bittered Sling, all names of the original cocktail, the Old Fashioned that we call today. All right, stay with me here, let's go. Alright everyone, I just got done washing my hands. This is a video on the Old Fashioned. Let's get started. Remember, if you're gonna be handling ice, make sure you always have your hands washed. This is very important so your guests think that you're clean. Not only think, but know that you're clean. And because I'll be handling ice today with my bare hands, per was the usual pre-COVID, I wash my hands, make sure everyone understands how clean I want them to be. Also, little hint, take care of your nails. Make sure your nails are clean. If you bartend, it's just such an important thing. It sounds crazy, and I know there's a lot of probably guys out here listening to this video saying, what, clean? Why do I have to clean my nails? Well, I was that way too, but when your hands are one of the most important parts of serving someone and you're touching their drinks and glassware and ice, please, please, please. Please, make sure your hands are clean and your nails are clean. All right, that's just step one of making any drink. So we'll start there. I won't have to mention that in other videos. Hopefully you guys will just know. All right, so let's begin. The Old Fashioned. All right, so a little history on the Old Fashioned, guys. The Old Fashioned, first mentioned as a cocktail, wasn't called the Old Fashioned yet, but it was called a Bittered Sling. And that happened in 1806 in Hudson, New York. At the time, someone was asking in the comment reader section, what is a cocktail? And the person defined it as a somewhat strong drink with sugar, bitters, water, and spirits, okay? And so that's where this begins. The term cocktail, I mentioned in another video, probably comes from horse buying. Horse sellers would sometimes jam, and this sounds crazy, but they would jam ginger sticks up their horses' rear ends in order to pop up and perk them up in the morning to make them look lively to potential buyers, and it would cock their tail as they pranced around. And the Old Fashioned was meant to settle your stomach and perk you up after a hangover, okay? So the original Old Fashioned, called the Bittered Sling, would have been for a hangover, believe it or not. Later on, they start calling it a whiskey cocktail, and these drinks also started to get a touch of curacao or maraschino liqueur added to them instead of just raw sugar. In regards to the sugar, sometimes the sugar cubes would have been unrefined sugar, swirled, maybe brown and white looking sugar cube. They may have had white sugar cubes as well, or brown sugar cubes. The sugar may have changed over time, so don't always think that a white sugar cube was probably the original. I doubt they bleached as much sugar as we do today when we want our sugar white and clean. Today, even we will use simple syrup, so that's just sugar put into a solution. We do 50-50, but some people like rich simple syrups. Just keep in mind, if you do that, you're gonna have to change your acid or adjust how much syrup you put in on my recipes, okay? So just make sure that you're aware of that. All right, guys, so let's get started on the Old Fashioned. The first thing you're gonna need is a jigger. There are lots of great jiggers out there. We call this a beehive jigger, which is a little bit bigger. All of the various amounts are written on the side conveniently. Now we work in dark bars usually, so that probably won't help you in a dark bar, but all the lines on the inside correspond to a 1/2 ounce, then a 3/4, going up from the bottom, then an ounce, then a 1.5 ounce, then a 2, and the very, very top is 2.5. Interestingly, sometimes you need a 2.5 ounce pour, so I do recommend looking into this jigger. Also, especially for this cocktail today, we have the bottom, which is about 0.33 ounces, about 1/3 of an ounce. So we won't use quite 1/3, but if you get used to using this, small amounts of measures can be done really easily with just a little touch, with just turning over this jigger. which is convenient, okay? This is a Cocktail Kingdom jigger. I will put a link in the description to this guy. Cocktail Kingdom guys in New York are some of the finest makers of tools that I know of. They're great, highly recommend them. This particular jigger doesn't go up to 2.5 ounces on this side, but this is 2 and 1.5 inside. And then on this side, you have a 1/4, 1/2, 3/4, and 1 going from the bottom up. And these are all the measurements you're gonna need to know, need to use in order to make lots of drinks, but mostly the drinks like the old fashioned. The next thing you're gonna need is glass. And ideally, you want a large rocks glass if you're gonna use big ice like we will today. If you don't, you can always use smaller glassware if you like. This is a great glass if you have small ice cubes. It's nice and pretty, but it's much smaller. This is 10 ounces. This is gonna be upwards of 12.5. And then we also have bigger ones here at Reliable Tavern, even larger. These are 14 or 15 ounce rocks glasses. And again, I can put a link in the description for the places we get those. They're great because they're flared, and flared glass is really nice when you're using large ice cubes, because your wash line, which is where the drink comes up, will make the glass look full, but the wash line won't be too high that someone will spill on it. And that's really important. If you know what ice cube you're gonna use in your drink, in your finished drink, you'll know about what kind of glass you need to use in order to get that drink to look perfect. And we'll talk more about wash line in a separate video eventually. When that happens, I will put a link in the description. So wash line's really important. But for today, the old fashioned, it's really just about making it look like the glass is full while using a bigger ice cube. So the next thing you're gonna want is ideally to get the largest ice cubes you can. Now, if you have what we call pillow ice or machine ice or deli ice, that's okay, but those will melt quicker on you. So your drink won't be able to last as long and be as tasty if you use that kind of ice. So what we prefer is to use large ice cubes that melt slowly, and what that gives is the guest or yourself or whoever's over at your house time to drink as long as they want without the drink becoming too watered down. And dilution is a big deal. Okay, let's talk more about the ice that you're gonna use in your old fashioned. We here use a bandsaw, and again, we will probably have a video about cutting up large ice cubes, but we use ice cubes that are cut, and then we trim the edges so that they fit down in this glass like we talked about. But not all the cubes are the same, okay? So what we like to do is we call this an old fashioned, and another drink we're gonna do a video, we like to call this a Negroni rock, a little bit taller, and that would go in our larger glasses, okay? And you can see that the distance from the top where these cubes are is about the same. So we don't mind a small rock for an old fashioned, and I'll tell you why. The recipe only has 2 1/4-ish ounces of actual liquid in it, where a Negroni has up to 3. And that means you need more space in a bigger glass. So now you know why we have multiple glasses in and at our bar at Reliable Tavern, okay? So, back to this one. We have the smaller rock, we have a cube. Now, some people will tell you a sugar cube is the way to go with an old fashioned. That is perfectly fine. I'm 100% on board with that. What I found when I moved to DC was I got a lot of return drinks. People like their old fashioned without the sugar at the bottom. However, in the old days, they probably would have served an old fashioned with a spoon or something like this straw spoon. And at the end of the old fashioned, that little powder, that little sugar at the bottom, they would have scooped out and ate like it was a little dessert, and they would have liked that. Nowadays, when someone sees something at the bottom of their drink, they get a little iffy about it. And so when I moved to DC from New York, we started using simple syrup in our old fashions. As far as the product goes, I find more consistency with simple syrup because you can measure the same amount of sugar every single time, whereas sugar cubes will only go into solution sometimes if the water's right, if it's not quite cold enough, and so you don't get consistent dissolving of the sugar cube into your drink, and that can change the consistency of your cocktail. So I prefer simple syrup these days, but if someone really wanted to make me an old fashioned with sugar cubes, I'd be fine. I would also consider, at least for my palate and modern palates today, if you're gonna use a little sugar dots from maybe Domino or some company like that, I would consider using 2. I would consider using 2 just because you need a little bit more sweetness in an old fashioned than you might think with those sugar cubes. After you use those sugar cubes, you also may want to add a touch of soda before you add the ice to the glass, so that the sugar starts to dissolve in a warmer in a warmer solution. So think about that as a way to get the cube dissolved. Remember that dissolving doesn't happen in colder temperatures as much as it does at warmer temperatures. So using a touch of water to dissolve that is great. Here's another thing. That little extra water is already starting dilution. We prefer here at Reliable to only get water from sugar cubes. Here at Reliable, we prefer to only get water from melting ice cubes. Ice cubes that have been freezing cold in a freezer that slowly melt over time. We don't like to add water if we can avoid it. While in the sugar cube old fashioned, you may want to add water in order to dissolve it, you also aren't able to have a really stiff drink up front. Here's another little detail that you may want to consider when making an old fashioned if you're using sugar cubes. When you add the water in order to dissolve the sugar cube, and when you mash it up, you may find that adding water changes the consistency of your cocktail as well. We only like to add water from ice cubes. We don't like to add water manually or in any way add soda unless the drink calls for it. In an old fashioned, it doesn't. Here's another thing. We love to serve the drink stiff for the guest. And the guest gets to choose if they want to drink it stiff or hang out with it for a little bit and let the water melt. To us, when a guest orders a drink that's on a rock, we consider that to be a message to the bartender that I will control the dilution as a guest. So we tend to serve those drinks a little hot or boozy so that they can decide when the old fashioned becomes wet enough for them to enjoy. They decide their own balance. Remember that. That's a big thing. An ice cube allows the guests to choose their own balance. That's important. So we don't want to add water and ruin that for the guests. Okay, so, because you can always, think about it guys, you can always add water to a drink later with melt, but you can't take it out once you put it in, okay? That's important. All right, so let's talk about the ingredients. Here at Reliable Tavern, we like to make bourbon old fashions, but if someone were to make a rye old fashioned or even a cognac old fashioned, which may have been the most popular booze put in old fashions in New Orleans, I would be totally okay with that. There's also a Wisconsin old fashioned that uses cognac, and a couple different strategies there. That's more of a new age, not so old like this. This is the original recipe. But you're more than welcome to try a Wisconsin old fashioned. They're kind of crazy. I love them, but that's up to you guys. Okay, so the first ingredient in the old fashioned, we're gonna use our simple syrup. Again, 50-50 sugar to water dissolved. We're gonna use the end of this beehive jigger, and we're gonna measure what we would call a scant 1/4 ounce. So that's what scant looks like. It's a little less than the top. That might even be a little much. There we go. There's a scant 1/4 ounce. I don't know if you guys can see that, but the liquid doesn't come to the top of the jigger, and that's because this is about 0.33 ounces, and we want about 0.22 sugar in this drink. We're gonna pour that over the ice. Then we're gonna add some bitters. This is Angostura bitters. This is how you would buy it in the store, okay? It's a famous label. The rumor, see how it's floppy? The rumor is that the Angostura company is owned by two brothers who don't really like each other. They don't communicate very well. And the myth is that the one brother made the labels and the other brother makes the bottle, and they got mad at each other, and the one brother said, I'm changing the bottle, I'm gonna make it smaller, and the other brother said, I ain't changing the label. So now you got a floppy label, and now it's iconic. Always comes with that little flop added to it. But then we like to put it in dropper bottles, and that again is just for consistency. Some people are bitters hounds and they dash hard, and some people bitter lightly. And so in order for my bartenders to be consistent from drink to drink, I decided that, we decided that bitters in dropper bottles are easier to do that. And I can put a link in the description to dropper bottles on Amazon. They're relatively cheap and they're easy to add bitters to. Now in this particular drink, the old fashioned, what we like is to have roughly 3 mils of bitters. Now It's gonna be hard to judge that, but these are about 1.5 per dropper if this bottle was full, but because it's a little empty, it's not going as high up into the dropper when I suck it in there. So I needed 3 droppers of bitters in this drink for this particular moment. That's about 3 milliliters of bitters. That's a touch higher than maybe we would use in a citrus cocktail, but about right for old fashions. Old fashions, we tend to like just a touch more bitters than in a Manhattan or other drinks. We're using bourbon for this, 2 ounces. You'll note all of our recipes are gonna be 2 ounces, almost across the board. So you can just expect that we'll have 2 ounces of booze in almost everything. And as you can see, our wash line is very nice here, right? Just to the top of the cube. It doesn't take over the cube. The cube isn't floating. We don't want Bob in there, okay, floating up and down. That's not what we want. We really just want the drink to come up as high as it can, but not over the cube, okay? For an old fashioned, that's a great wash line. It looks like it's full. It doesn't look like the bartender took a drink already. That's important, even though I'm about to. And when we stir, I'm only gonna stir this 3 or 4 times. This is a great spoon, okay? Great bar spoon, again, from Cocktail Kingdom. I will link in the description. It has a paddle on the end that's great for getting around big ice. Highly recommend it. I'll put a link in the description. But I only stir it 3 or 4 times, and the reason is I just want to get the ingredients combined, but again, we don't want to start dilution because we want our guests to decide when they want to drink their drink. Diluted, highly diluted, a little bit diluted. They didn't tell us to shake a drink up where we get to choose, so we let them choose, and that's important. Next is the peel. The peel's important. Some of you may be used to old fashions with cherries muddled into it. You certainly are welcome to do that. Some people put little orange slices in there. You're certainly welcome. The original didn't have orange or cherry juice in the old fashioned. So don't hate that, but it really wasn't in the original. That recipe comes later on and is made popular at the Pendennis Club, for instance, in Louisville, where they claim they coined the term old fashioned in the 1900s. So that version of an old fashioned with cherries and oranges in it comes along much later. I mentioned that Wisconsin old fashioned. That also has muddled cherries and cherry juice and often orange slices muddled inside of it, which is fine if you like that. Hey, look, this is your world. Bartender's just making drinks in it. I want you to be happy, but we're doing the original today. So when you do, I recommend getting a Swiss peeler. Now, there is nothing in this world that will cut you worse than a Swiss peeler. It will take all of your fingers off. So this is very important. One of the first things I teach my bartenders is you're gonna cut yourself 3 times. The first time is gonna be in training while I'm trying to teach you how to do this, and you don't listen and you cut yourself. That happened to me. It's gonna happen to everybody. Second time is gonna be when you're busy a few months in to using the peeler. You're gonna cut yourself the second time, and it's terrible. And then there's a third time that you'll never see coming. It'll be 10 years after you've been bartending forever, and you'll just be talking to somebody and you'll cut yourself and you'll be like, how in the world did I do that? But these things are vicious, so we gotta hide our fingers on the fruit style hand, on the fruit hand. Keep this away from their fruit holding hand, okay? And the way you do that is you never go on the same hemisphere as the blade. So my pinky is not hanging out under here so that it gets diced off, and that's always the finger that gets hit in my experience. And it's horrible. It'll take off your fingernails, it'll take skin off, it's awful. So, grab it. I like to wiggle a little bit to get it started, and then I start pulling down, and as I do, I re-grip, and again, I pull down. And importantly, I want you to notice this thumb. This thumb is putting pressure on the peeler and pulling down, okay? And that pressure on the orange is what gets you the depth of peel that you want. So what we want is just a little bit of dotted white on the other side of this peel, okay? Just a little bit. If there's too much white, drink will get bitter. We don't like that. And if there's not enough, the peel's too thin, and won't stiffen up in the drink, okay? Now I'm gonna show you about how much oil I put on it. You wanna hold the peel, white side towards you, okay? And you're just gonna pinch it with your 2 fingers, okay? And what you get out of that is oil, and I don't know if you guys can see this, but you see about that much oil? You see those little dots? That's just oil spraying out of this. okay? And that's about how much we want to drink. You don't want to overdo it. You can ruin a drink with too much. So now, in order to get more oil out of it, I'm just gonna pinch it a little lower, okay, down here, and we're gonna do it again. You can get so much oil out of an orange, okay? So 2 pinches, just little light ones. I saw it glimmer over the drink. I think we have the right amount. Okay, now let's talk about a peel. When you place it in a drink, okay, 2 rules. 1, you can place it in as long as the guest can reach the top of the peel without dipping their hands into the drink. This one's really close. I would probably leave it on the cube like this, hanging out, so the guests can pull it out without putting their fingers in their drink. The other way to do it would be to put it on top of the drink like so, okay? We want that nice little bend in it, okay? And then what we're doing is we're giving the guests the option of taking it out or not, or adding more. I've been to some bars that I really love. They don't put peels in, they discard every peel. That's their style, they want to do it that way, but they're not giving me the choice to add more orange to the drink. That's sort of the point. I kind of want guests to be able to decide what they want their drinks to taste like. I add a little bit of orange. If they want more, they can do it. Again, don't put too much orange oils in the drink. It'll ruin it. Harry Craddock's Savoy cocktail book put a lemon as well in his Old Fashions. So just to honor the great Harry Craddock, I'm gonna put a touch of lemon in mine as well. I'm gonna put it over. Got some lemon oil in my eyes. And now you got rabbit ears, okay? Lemon and orange in the drink. I'm gonna put them in because that's for me. All right, and you have an Old Fashioned, everybody. Look at that. That is a great looking drink, okay? See right through it, clear ice. Ah, it's killer. Hope you enjoyed this video. Next time, we'll be working on more drinks, probably the daiquiri, because I love daiquiris. All right, and we'll see you next time. To better drinks. Cheers. Hey guys, before you go, I would be remiss if I didn't mention my employer, where I'm the general manager, Reliable Tavern in Petworth, Washington, D.C., where we do all these videos and trainings for bartenders, just like the ones we're doing on these YouTube videos. And you also can get our products on DC to Go, a local company that also is great. It doesn't take too much for us to get delivered items to you, mostly cocktails to go. And so if you guys want to reach out and order, I will put the links to the website and a link to DC to Go, where you guys can get our stuff in the DC area. We've always believed at Reliable Tavern that a great tavern should be commonplace, not hard to find. If you guys have time or if you're in the area, come check us out at Reliable Tavern. Thank you guys for watching the video. Like always, to better drinks. See you guys.